Welcome to the Visible and Unstoppable podcast. I'm your host, Louise Kirk, and I support women to have the confidence to be seen and sell. And today we have a very special guest, Liz Rodriguez. And Liz is a transformation coach who helps former athletes in their 40s break free from that all or nothing pattern and rebuild their strength, energy, and confidence through her strength and longevity method. It's lovely to have you, Liz.
Yeah, thanks so
So,
much.
so Liz, can you tell us more about how you came to build your business?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna go back. I think my story in terms of the health and wellness part is sort of typical. I was a college athlete. I studied exercise science when I was in college, and I think I knew pretty in my 20s that I like wanted to help people. Right, I really wanted to get involved in the fitness field and became a personal trainer, and really enjoyed that. And I think really over the last, I've been doing it for 20 years. You have different chapters in how and how your career plays out. And so I think in the beginning, it really was for me about, helping others and really helping them find joy in health and nutrition. Right. And as I got further into it, you become more specialized, and I worked more with former athletes and a lot of people with back issues and things because I underwent back surgery. And when that happened, which has now been, I can't believe it, it's been almost 8 years since then. That was when things really started to shift for me again, and I started to see things a little differently. And not only was I having to kind of completely redefine who I was as an athlete, as a person, as a coach, because I wasn't the same person anymore after surgery. I was also really figuring out that I was at a new stage in life and I needed different things. I think, especially those former athletes out there, those type A personalities, a lot of entrepreneurs, is we just want to go pedal to the metal all the time in everything in life. And eventually that stops working. And I think, through my strength and longevity method, it really is starting about, how to rewire that person's thought process on like what is health and wellness for them, especially in their 40s as their bodies begin to change and go through perimenopause and menopause. But also, like, what do I want to be doing right now? Like, how am I going to make myself feel good now in the workouts, in the food that I eat? And really, I find that that's going to help not only redefine you as a person, but it's going to really connect with all areas of your life, right? Like, that's going to filter into what you do with your relationships, with everything. So, that's just a little bit about me and kind of sort of, I guess, part of a journey I've taken.
And as someone who is approaching that second chapter of life, and I know that a lot of my listeners are women who are, typically above those 40s.
Hmm.
What is the difference then that you find in terms you were saying about, you kind of show up differently. Your body is changing a lot. So how you would perhaps look after yourself or how you would train prior to, the perimenopause, menopausal phases to
Hmm.
perhaps now, especially as a lot of the advice out there is so generic, right? You just see the same thing, all the 20-year-old influencers telling you to do the same thing. Um, what's the difference then that women need to be doing in order to be able to look after themselves?
Yeah, and really, I'll go sort of more general and then more specific. In reality, the wellness industry obviously targets women in a way that, we're sort of kind of put in a box in terms of like, hey, this is what you should do and why, this is what you should look like, all those things. So think of society at large. And then a lot of the information that we are fed, it doesn't mean that it's not good information, but a lot of it is actually only tested on men and not women. So we are at a point really just in the last 15, 20 years where we're studying women more and realizing there's changes at every age, but specifically when we talk about 40s, and as we go through perimenopause, which by the way, could be someone in their 30s or 40s or 50s. It's a long process and it can be a couple years, it could be 15 years. So I think when you talk about a huge chunk of time, which by the way is pretty much right in our prime years in terms of earning and a lot of life changes, getting married, having kids, all those things. So just kind of putting that in there too. But what we're really seeing in terms of the research for specifically for women in their 40s is we need to be doing less taxing cardio. We need to be lifting heavier weights and maintaining or growing muscle mass. We need more protein. We need more sleep. And so it's a lot of things that I think we hear, but I think now we're finally getting to a point where um, women are realizing, like, I don't think I'm doing any of those things, or they're looking at everything through the viewpoint of, well, this is what I saw in terms of intermittent fasting, or not eating any carbs, or only doing hit workouts. And yes, there are people that are going to see results from those things, but not necessarily if you are a woman in that stage in life. It might actually be draining your system instead of helping you build it up. And I think being able to connect with those tools and still feel good about your body and what you're doing and feeling strong, especially at that stage in life, that's important, right? So that's a little bit, just some
Absolutely.
tidbits in terms of if women are listening, where they're like, well, where do I start? First, anything that you're doing fad wise, look it up and see, were women tested on this? Does it work for us? We are not men. What does Stacey Sims always say? Dr. Stacey Sims, women are not small men. Like, we're different. So we want to make sure that we are planning accordingly when it comes to the choices that we make for nutrition and self fitness.
Absolutely. And also, I see a lot around now almost this assumption that the way that women should look, there's a typical way that people and influencers say you should look this way, but also this idea that looking this way is linked to you're being healthy,
Hmm.
where as opposed to focusing on what's the healthiest part for your body in this stage of life. And so
Hmm.
seeing a lot of information out there, a lot of reels, a lot of social media with women who particularly, look a particular way. And when you look
Yes.
into it, you're like, is it actually healthy? Even though they're promoting themselves as a health guru or a health, come follow my plan for the biggest, best butt or most toned abs or whatever it is, right? Other things that you see within the industry that are promoted as this is really good for women because more aesthetically, that are actually damaging in terms of women, especially in this perimenopausal stage.
Yes. So I want to talk about some of the things that happen in perimenopause, because I want the women listening to really connect with, if these things are happening to you, this could be something, right? And so what are some things that come up for women during perimenopause? Sometimes there's brain fog. Sometimes there's like loss of energy and muscle mass, irritability in the morning, not sleeping as well. So those are things that happen that all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is becoming a little bit more chronic, or man, I'm doing these workouts and they are gassing me. Like, I'm not recovering like I used to. So if you've heard any of those things, or you're just thinking like, "Oh, I'm getting older." Well, you are, but those are things that are happening. Those are symptoms. So what if we could connect those with some of the things that you might be doing? So with some of those things that they might be doing. So one of the first things I always talk about is intermittent fasting. Um, Women have, and actually it's really for all women, but specifically as we get into perimenopause, our body starts to change regardless. We don't process carbs as well. So I'm gonna talk about that one. Because of our hormone levels changing more, our cortisol going up and down and all that, it means that in our adrenals, we need to be getting more sleep. So what I'm essentially doing right now is, and I'm kind of connecting those symptoms and saying, this is probably what's causing it. Not always. You got to go to your doc sometimes to check on this, but just overview. And so coming back specifically with the nutrition, with the intermittent fasting, when we don't eat in the morning, there's something that goes off in our brain that is saying, "Oh my gosh, something's happening. I need to counterbalance this. There's no nutrients." And that's what shoots our cortisol levels up. And more people are becoming familiar with what happens when we have higher cortisol levels, we're likely to put on belly fat, um, more issues with gut. There's all kinds of stuff, right? It's a stress hormone. So one of the first things that I have women look at is, are you eating anything in the first 30 to 60 minutes that you're waking up? And all of a sudden, you do one thing and you're starting to see some of these symptoms alleviate. Same thing on the flip side when we talk about the workouts, where they're doing more hit workouts, and it's just we tend to be more sensitive to that high intensity cardio all the time, and it's become more draining on the system. So one of the things we look at is, what type of cardio are you doing? And maybe we need to kind of reframe what that looks like so that you get done with the workout and you're not feeling exhausted. You actually feel, more, we'll say, energized. So those are just a couple of examples of some things.
Beautiful. And you mentioned before as well about your strength and longevity method. Could you walk us through that?
Yeah. And what's really interesting about it is, it's, I always have them in a certain order, but that doesn't always mean that that's how we sort of work on with women. It depends on the client. But essentially, from start to finish, the first one is rewire, which I touched on just briefly before, but really the notion of sort of rewiring your notion of what does it mean to be healthy, and what are those actions and behaviors that are going to, go along with that. Like what is it going to look like for me to build a program that's going to fit for my life right now. Then we go into rebuild, and that's looking at their workouts in terms of making sure that we're gaining muscle and we're losing body fat, versus vice versa. We get into refuel and looking at the nutrition and making sure that, based on that person's goals, as well as any symptoms that they have from perimenopause, that we're trying to alleviate some of that through that nutrition and making sure that it's kind of hitting the mark, on how they feel. And from there, we talk about recovery or recover, and that's just meaning that it's recovery is not just taking a day off here and there, but ensuring that there are recovery methods, whether it's looking at their sleep or their stress levels, whether it's adding in meditation or breathing, making sure that there's something within that program that's helping them to, sort of revitalize themselves, we'll say, in a way, right? Making sure that they are giving themselves that rest and understanding what that means. And then really from there, redefine, which is knowing that your journey is going to continue to be redefined. So let's continue to make sure that this program aligns with, not only your goals, but how you want to look and feel. So that, at every age that you feel like I feel good about where I'm going and what I'm doing and why.
Beautiful. And what I find a lot, I mean, totally been guilty of it myself, but also when I speak to a lot of women, most women who are listening here, they have businesses. They might also still be in employment, in that transitional phase between being able to leave. They also have kids, they have families. And
Mhm.
so ultimately, all the time they know what they have to do, they just
Mhm.
don't do it, right? They just don't, whatever it is, craft the time, or that just gets pushed aside. How do you support your clients to actually implement the things they need to in order to be
Mhm.
able to continue to look after themselves?
And this tends to be the most difficult area. And this is really, we'll kind of stick it underneath the rewire pillar. And in terms of them coming to me and saying, like, well, I want to change these things, but these are the other things that are going on in my life, which obviously we need to address. And a lot of it really comes down to, sort of reframing and saying, so you need to help all these other people, or you have all these other things in your life that you're working on and accomplishing. But what if you're not putting your best foot forward? It's kind of the easiest way to think about it. It's like the oxygen mask in the airplane, right? You got to put yours on first before you're going to help others. And I think it's a really, easy example to refer to say, hey, if you're not giving your body what it needs, you're not really, being at your best. And what if you could be, whether it's I want to accomplish more with my career, or I want to make sure that I'm not only like working and seeing my kids, but that I'm getting the most out of both of those things. I don't feel like I'm failing. And some of that, then obviously, depending on if there's other people involved, sort of opening up that conversation to say, are there opportunities for, maybe a little bit more integration within the family? I give an example of one of my clients that a lot of the meal prepping and everything was falling on her, and she had teenagers. And I said, hey, have you ever thought about getting them involved? And now they each take a day in terms of cooking at night. Not only is it good for them, like they're learning a skill, it's giving her more space where, she realized that there was different times when she wanted to work out and she thought she was still having to still kind of show up for the family. And really, after we were able to talk it through and have an open conversation, it was like, oh, maybe I need to redo this. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. And I think that's just being a woman. I think we take on a lot, whether we're talking about having an extended family or not. I think we tend to take on way too much. And we don't know how to ask for help. And in reality, we're going to have to look at this situation that you have. And we need to figure out how we're going to get in those other things. And I don't want it to feel like in addition to, I want it to feel like sort of in conjunction with. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I do think that's one of the things that as women we do struggle with. It's that whole, first of all, we think, at least at a subconscious level, it's all our responsibility. Even if we're working, even if we're, busy, that caretaker mode is on. Like this is our responsibility. We have to do the cooking and the cleaning and the caring for everyone and meeting their
Mhm.
emotional needs. And also there's this disconnect between even when you go, hey, actually, this shouldn't all be my responsibility. It's being able to have those conversations with your partner or your kids or whoever it is, or maybe it's your work colleagues to say,
Mhm.
actually, I need you to take this on, not just in terms of help me out once in a while, but actually, this is now your responsibility. This is not my responsibility. I'm not your manager checking if you're doing it right, but like this is for you so you can actually create time for yourself, which I think is some of the biggest challenges that women face, especially as you said,
Yes.
like high achieving professional women who are used to doing the go, 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 and
Yes.
being in control of their own environment and being in control of the results because of the effort that they put in to be able to
Mhm.
delegate to other people can be a real challenge.
Yeah. And not only that, I think specifically with entrepreneurs and definitely women that are looking to grow their career is that there's a lot of this, well, I'll do this when, when I'm this successful or, that I've earned it. That's also a lot of the way that we are marketed towards with a lot of wellness products is you've earned this, so you can do this. And I think self care is a great thing, but self care does not need to have a dollar amount. It doesn't need to be a massage or nails. It could be you sitting with a cup of tea and having quiet time for 10 minutes. So I always like to refer that I think it's important that we recognize how we're marketed towards and like what products are pushed towards us because it's part of the conversation. It's making sure that women know that you have full autonomy on how you define your self-care and how you take care of yourself. I think it's an important point.
I think it is a very important point that you made because I do believe that we do often go, hey, once I've achieved this thing, then I will look after myself, or then I will have this reward. But at
Hmm.
the same time, it's redefining that idea of self care not being that one off time. We'd never turn to our kids and go, I will only care for you once you have done X, Y, Z, right? We care for them unconditionally all the time, whether it's convenient for us or not, whether we're busy, whether they've been good that day or bad that day, or whatever has happened. We don't automatically go, no, 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 you haven't earned my care. But yet we do
Hmm.
that to ourselves. We go, well, you haven't earned my care. You haven't earned my compassion. You haven't earned my whatever that is for me to provide what you need right now. We're going to have to wait. Like, I would never imagine saying that to my child who was like burnt out, right? If they were like, they've had a huge big day or week at school and they're just tired and they're hungry. And I'm like, no, no, you haven't earned your food yet or you haven't earned your break. You could never imagine saying that. But we do it to ourselves
Correct.
all the time, right? As women, we condition ourselves to go, not you, not yet. So, and I don't know if you have any answers for this, but how do we start to change that conversation with ourselves as women to shift that perspective of self care is something that you just do all the time for yourself, as you would your child or loved ones?
Correct. And I think you actually kind of touched on a little bit of really is that sometimes it's actually just the awareness. I'm helping, I'm sort of in the midst of also alongside the coaching is this last year I've helped to start to open up new Pilates studios and grow. And it's kind of like another side project. And which means that in this last location I was at was literally like geriatric millennial central. Like every member that we have is like 30 to 55. So it's been like amazing because I can, as I'm working through new things and new processes, I have a nice audience. And I was talking to one of the women about nutrition and like how she started to gain more weight in her belly. And we were talking about these things. And one of the things that came up was, yeah, but if I eat earlier in the day, like if I eat more in the morning, then I'm hungrier and then I eat more throughout the day. I'm like, so how much is it that you're supposed to be eating then? Like we have this notion that we're not supposed to eat. And this becomes part of an issue of how we when we feed ourselves during the day. So part of what I do in the beginning really is as we're walking through a regular day, this is not about judgment. This is actually about awareness to say, are there any behaviors in here that we know right off the bat are just not healthy? That how are we going to start to look at them, such as skipping meals, such as only having coffee for breakfast, the way that we react to stress when we're at work. Like, let's look at these behaviors and things that you do on a regular basis. And sometimes it's not always about adding new stuff in. It might be about eliminating or changing behavior that we're already doing. It's the same notion of like, as we start to make changes with specifically workouts and with nutrition, where are you already kind of designating time for that now, and how can we maximize that? That's a very different conversation than saying, okay, Luis, I'm going to need we need 3 hours of meal prep each week. We need this, for your workouts. That's going to feel very overwhelming. It's a different conversation to say, well, I already have this time allotted. What if I'm just making different food down? You know what I mean? And it helps them realize that, what is it? I don't have any research for this, but I know there's like a thing of like over 90% of our days are already like mapped out for us. We are very habitual species. And so sometimes it's about looking at the behaviors that we do on a regular basis and say, like, is there opportunity here for us to start to already get to these goals, but not have to make these massive changes? That's one of the first big areas that we go to for that. So, and that starts to kind of really help us sort of figure out the rest of where is this program going and where are they going to need the most help. Sometimes people come to me and think that it's just going to be, oh, this is all about nutrition. And then they realize, oh my God, no, it's about my stress relief. Or they come into it just thinking it's going to be workouts. And then, oh, so we're going to have to work on nutrition. It's like, yes. So,
I love that you tailor it and really look at every person as an individual, because obviously there are so many programs out there, like you said, that are either created for men or created just as a generic thing where you're like, just follow these things. And also there's a lot of terrible things out there. Like, I
yes.
remember, look, a little bit of a side. I just remember having a conversation with a lady who was saying she couldn't eat blueberries because they weren't on the list of this diet thing she could eat, but she could have as much bacon as she wanted. And I was like, this is a problem right out the bat. What are you doing? You can't eat blueberries, but you can have as much bacon as you like. And I was like, okay. And so we also know there's a lot of stuff out there. And how do you, as someone who's always looking at, okay, how do I improve my health? How do I improve my productivity, right? As well, because as someone who has got so many things to do and juggling so many hats, I also do fall into that category of, but how do I make myself more efficient? Especially as I start to notice that, as you said, I don't want to say decline. I think we just open up to this new era of, perimenopause and all of these wonderful things. What then can people like me do where we could fit the smaller things in? Because the reality is most of the time, and I 100% for myself, whenever I've kind of failed at something, it's because I go, yeah, I'm going to go all in. That boost goes where you're like, I'm going to do 6 workouts of this and I'm going to completely change my life and I'm going to cut out this. And you go 2 weeks in, you're like, well, I don't have time for these things. I don't have time for this.
Mhm.
And so what are some of the smaller key things that women who just do not have time can implement into their
Yes.
lives, or small changes that you see a lot that people are maybe doing but shouldn't do, or vice versa, that they can
Mhm.
implement like straight away and so easily into their lives?
Yeah, and let's talk like super high level, some of the general things that we know that women really, really need of this age group that we've been speaking on. So let's take the cardio aspect, right? Like, so I mentioned, hey, you shouldn't be doing draining cardio. And so let's talk about, I always talk about the minimum numbers. Like, what are the numbers that women are going to need in order to like get the maximum effort, right? It's kind of like the notion of um the 10,000 steps rule, which it came from like some study, I think in China, where it kind of got blown out of proportion. What we know is that as long as you're getting around at least 7,000 steps each day, that's the minimum in terms of like avoiding cardiovascular disease and diabetes and things like that. So it's one of the first things I say is pull out your phone or your watch and let's start tracking how much that you're moving each day. Because we already know that generally speaking, that's like one of the best things that you can do. And people just don't do it. And if you don't do it, You're not getting the benefits. So that's always like the first thing. And then as we're looking at workouts in general, the other two things I say is that we want to make sure that you're getting in some basic strength training twice a week, as well as at least 1 or 2 days where you're doing something like either doing some sprints or like a harder cardio workout for like a minute at a time times four. So think about how that's pretty short, right? Like you want me to go run hard for a minute and then like recover and do it again, or do it on a rower on the bike. And then in terms of the strength training, just doing all of your kind of your major big movements twice a week. And that's an easy place where people are like, okay, I got to do some walking. I got to do some little sprint workout and a little bit of strength training, which means if we added up that time, that could be the walking. Let's just say it's sprinkled throughout the week. But the other workouts, that could be like a total of like an hour and a half. Okay, so let's look at 7 days. Am I doing three or four 20-minute workouts? Am I doing 3 30-minute workouts? And then we can start to map those in because they're really, really small. And then really with the nutrition, that gets a little bit more specific for the person. But the first place that I go to is we kind of go through a symptoms list of like, where are you at and where are some opportunities? And I always just go by symptoms first. Is it more about energy? Is it more like gut health? Is it brain fog? That's going to help us know that let's look at what you're already doing. We know you're eating throughout the day. When are you eating? What are you eating? Is it a matter of changing just what you're eating? Is it the timing? And then we can start to plug them in. And then really from there, just looking at other large areas of opportunity, which I always give the three big ones are going to be sleep, water, and stress. Are there opportunities in terms of like how much is this person sleeping? And how can we start to sort of look at that? Because that tends to be one of, got to dive into the schedule. Overall, water intake and just looking at the stress, that helps them also know that, again, it might not just be a bunch of new behaviors. It might be that we're just sort of reframing how you're approaching some of the things in your life. And I think that helps most women kind of look at and say, okay, great. I heard some kind of specifics on what she wants me to do, but I also heard some things of maybe I need to be looking at how I'm living my life right now and how I feel, um, and how I'm moving and all that stuff. And your body's very intuitive. It will tell you what it needs. You just have to kind of pay attention. And women, we are very good at men are really good at compartmentalizing too, but I think we're really good at compartmentalizing like how we feel. Like, how did you feel after you ate that? Or like, how do you feel going on 3 hours of sleep and drinking 6 cups of coffee? How does that make you feel when we ignore those things? You know what I mean? So that was kind of the long answer.
Absolutely. And you mentioned um, around nutrition and things like brain fog. Are there particular things you find that do cause or I say cause, but like, increase that brain fog for women?
hmm And a lot of it has to do with, if you think about it, when our blood sugar levels kind of go up and down, that's going to be one of the reasons. And so, um, think about it. If your body needs nutrients and it's trying to pull from other areas, whether you're going through ketosis because you're burning through body fat or muscle mass, like what's going on in the body that's causing that brain fog? A lot of times it has to do with us not eating any carbs, right? So I mentioned before that we start to actually process carbs not as well. And I forgot to come back to it. And so it's actually really important for women to make sure that their fiber intake and specifically their complex carbohydrate intake is sufficient. Because if it's not, and our gut health is not good, that's another gut health, blood sugar regulation, all those things can cause brain fog. So that's one of the first places I look at is as we look at that food diary and sort of figure out, well, how specific do you want to get? Like if you have these symptoms, like how much are you willing to start to work on these things? What makes sense as we make these changes? But that's one of the first places I go to is what's their caffeine intake like, their overall carb intake and or fiber, um, as well as and that kind of leads into the next thing is what's their protein intake like and fat intake. But I always go with the fiber and stuff first. I find that's most important. And then from there, do we have other opportunities in other areas so that person starts to like, what's great is that you start doing what that body needs and you have less brain fog and you're like, oh, I'm going to keep eating like that.
Yeah,
It's like, this is
100%.
amazing.
Because so many of the women that I speak to who are struggling with the brain fog, it's their biggest challenge is because, they built all this amazing, businesses, or they're great at their jobs, or they're able to manage their household because their brain's been functioning so well. These are high performing women, right? Even if they don't notice it at the time, they think they're the average Joe, and you're like, you are not the average Joe. And so when that starts to go, it's almost like this sense of panic sets in, and they go, oh, all of a sudden they start going, I'm failing. I'm not good enough. I can't handle the things that I used to be able to handle. It feels so much harder. And that's when they start to really feel it, not just the brain fog, but in their body, where they start to feel like I don't have it all together. And they
Yep.
almost, and that's the biggest struggle for them, because their brain is so valuable in everything they do. And so being able to access information for women and not just say, well, tough luck, it's just a part of aging, which a lot of women still get when they go to the doctors for advice, or, you can just
Yep.
take this thing, suck it up, princess, is really
Yep.
valuable to be able to have that as a resource. So
Mhm.
you were saying around the brain fog that it's more about making, well, potentially different things, but like having that fiber in your body and checking on, when you were saying about carbohydrate levels, was it more to do with particular carbohydrates that women should or shouldn't be eating in terms of
Yes.
impacting that?
Yeah, and I think what happened along the way is that carbs all became lumped into one category, and they're not the same. So when we talk about, what is it that we don't want to be eating as much, the things that spike our blood sugar, so things like soda and candy and typically white starchy foods. Yet I mentioned complex carbohydrates, and I would say that there's like three categories of those things that we can go into. We can talk about kind of like root vegetables. That's always my go-to because it also tends to be the one list of food that I don't care if you got what you got going on, Hashimoto's, gluten intolerance, celiac. Everybody can have root vegetables, and I'm talking about turnips and butternut squash and acorn squash and sweet potatoes and things like that. So you have one category that's a complex carbohydrate. We've kind of put that in in section. Then you got your beans and legumes, which most people recognize. A lot of times it's not um, canned beans have stuff in them that makes us gassy. If you make fresh, you're not going to have that issue. So you have another whole area there of beans and legumes. And then you have, we'll just say kind of your complex carbs that are great. It's everything from whole grain foods to like whole wheat bread to whole wheat pasta to farro, bulgur, quinoa, all that stuff. So there are going to be some instances in there, especially with that, the latter two categories where we might be intolerant to some of those foods. And so when we're intolerant to something that's going to make us a little bit more, it's not as digestible for us, a little gassy, things like that. But there's typically plenty of options for you to have within all those categories. So sometimes there's a little trial and error in that. But what's interesting is that typically we're already eating other carbs that are not agreeing with us. We just eat them because we like them. So it's
Yeah.
also getting used to how did I feel after that meal? Man, that put me to sleep. Or like, man, I have this reaction. There's gonna be exceptions. We all eat things that we like that we know are like, we're not gonna feel great after eating half a pizza, but we're still gonna do it.
Yeah.
Let's just be real here. But on a regular basis, the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time, what are we trying to grab? And women are always amazed, whether they're adding in, my big thing is overnight oats or having like some whole wheat toast with my eggs in the morning or whatever it is that we're eating. But it really makes you feel so much better. Like, it's something that we tend to cut out. And when we talk about low carb diets, men tend to do very well on low carb diets. Women do horribly. They do not do well because we tend to overeat on fats and simple carbs and things like that and sugars. And it's just not a good idea. So what's very interesting is that if somebody is going to do a transcript on this podcast and they're going to like go through and look at a lot of the nutrition, none of these things are things that we haven't heard before, but I really always hope to package it in a way that it's like, oh, but that's why I should be doing that. It's kind of like we all brush our teeth. We're sort of all sold on this. Like you don't need to convince everybody. I kind of want to get that way with certain things with nutrition and with fitness where it's just like, oh, I'm just supposed to do that. because it's part of me, like, I don't know, becoming a better human. It's like what my body needs, you know?
Absolutely, and as you said, most people do know. I mean, most of the time they do know, apart from some of the crazy fads people try. But most people do know, we know we shouldn't eat all the sugary things. We know the pizza that we ordered from the takeaway shop's not good for us. We know what we should eat, but it is that implementing, right? Making, like you said, those small shifts sometimes, as opposed to trying to overhaul your entire life in 1 week, which we know is very challenging and often fails. But making those small changes, that changes to swap certain things out, to get more support in the kitchen from your kids, just all the small things I think that actually do help people to implement those changes. So I feel like we've learned so much, Liz. I've already got like so many notes in my mind of all the things that I could change, especially when you talk about some of the things I'm like, oh yeah, I'm guilty. I knew that. I knew that. But now I have to actually go and do it, especially getting my children to help. But I know that you also have a gift for our listeners. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, you know what? It's something I put together over the last couple of months, and it's just a little ebook. And I think it's to help. We definitely touched on some of the things, within the podcast, but just going into like these are really the big three mistakes that I see women making, and really kind of the reasons behind each of them. And it's really just an easy way for you to be able to take that ebook and start to implement some things right away into your life. Where we want to make this, I think a lot of this information, I think those of us that coach because we want to help others, we also want to be able to get our information out there and make sure that women are feeling supported within their journey for health and wellness, and that they know there's go-to people that they ask, like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about this. Oh, I have someone to go to for that. I have someone to look for information. I think that's so important. So I definitely hope that people take advantage of it and are able to get something out of that ebook, and that's things that they can implement right away.
Beautiful, thank you. And I will link that in the description, whether you are listening here or watching on YouTube. And where can our listeners find you, Liz?
Yeah, website's super easy. It's just lizrodriguezcoaching.com. So easy place for me to find there. I am on Facebook as Liz Rodriguez Coaching as well as Instagram. So look for me there, and whether it's you want to set up like a free consultation because you want to go through some notes, or you just want to take in the blogs and information and stuff that I have on the site, it's there, like, right? It's there for information, any way that people can help themselves moving forward. So I always want to be able to be a resource for people.
Beautiful. And I will link all of those as well in the notes. So make it all easy to go and find Liz for more support.